Hey folks, it's Dr. Gilchrist, and as promised, I'm recording a little section for you today to show you a little bit about how to search through databases, in particular psych articles, so that you have a better grip on what you're going to be doing for your homework assignment, and also to help you start looking for some peer-reviewed papers on the part set queuing effect. I don't plan to take more than 30 minutes on this. I might start talking a little bit about why research is helpful, just to kind of get you in a good mindset for Wednesday. But the goal of today is to mostly go through databases. So as you can see here, I'm on the library page. So this is library.cadi.edu. And as you can see, there are it's kind of a one-stop shop for stuff, but we're going to be looking at our databases. So we're going to go ahead and you can search EBSCO, but I'm going to go ahead and do an A through Z list so that you're kind of aware of what we're going to be looking for. So what you're going to see is they've kind of, they have for business. The search is for business, but you can see up here we have EBSCO, Gale databases, history, science, periodicals, and psychology. So if you click over to the side, you can see we have a few different things. So for if you're looking for research on child development and adolescent studies, you can find it there. We're going to go ahead and click here. We're going to look at psych articles. So this is a database by the American Psychological Association. There are full text articles in psych articles, but it's not going to have everything. So psych info is going to be a little broader. It may not necessarily have access to all of the articles, but it will tend to be a little broader than psych articles. But one of the positives of psych articles is that you are going to find full text, peer-reviewed scientific articles in psychology. So we're going to go ahead and visit psych articles. This is done through EBSCOhost. Oh, you don't like me, do you? Okay, let's go ahead and fix this. So I'm going to go ahead and work through this, and I will come back once I have verified my institution. So I have gone ahead and verified my institution. So we have chosen the APA Psych Articles page. And so let's say, for example, I wanted to find an article on part set queuing. So I'm going to go ahead and look for part set queuing, and I'm going to go ahead and click search. This is just going to help us find these. So you can see that we've actually found a few different articles. Now, notice that some of these are going to call this part list queuing. We're going to go ahead and apply equivalent subjects. So this helpfully did this for us. So we have part list queuing. We have some video effects. I don't know what the royal wedding has to do with this, but okay. So notice that it pulled up a lot on queuing, but this isn't exactly what we wanted. So maybe we should try part list queuing and see if we can find anything there. So in this case, we really only found one article, and it was published in 2012, and it does include full text. But you can kind of see what I mentioned about some of the limitations of psych articles here. It's only going to have full text, which means that everything that is available may not necessarily be on psych articles. And so I do want to spend a little bit of time after we go through this database and some of the ins and outs, kind of showing you other ways that you can get articles that you may not be able to find on psych articles, because they're only going to have journals that are associated with APA publishing. So that's going to be a very small set of journal lists. So let's say, for example, we were wanting to look at something like working memory. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a search. And as you can see, there's quite a bit here. Notice that with working memory, there are over 3,735 hits. So in this particular case, if we're only looking for a few different articles, we may want to break down this list. So what I want to show you are a couple of different things that you can do on this little bar to the left to kind of refine your results. So first of all, we've got publications here from 1905. Working memory did not actually exist as a term until about the 1950s or 60s. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and restrict my search to 1960, just to see if that kind of helps cut down a bit. You can see it cut down a little bit, but not very much. But notice now that anything that I am including, I can use this little slider bar or this to kind of cut down on my publication date. I can also only limit to those that contain full text. Most of these will, so this really shouldn't change too much, and as you can see, it doesn't. One of the benefits of psych articles is anything on here is going to be full text. However, you're not going to be able to find everything on here. So again, let's try to see if we can do some limitations. So we're going to go ahead and pick any peer-reviewed journal. So you can see here on source types, I've clicked that. I've cut it down a little bit, but we could still do more. Let's go ahead and pick subject. Let's see if we can find a major heading here. So maybe I'm interested in a few different things. Now, notice that when I click on these subject major headings, I can pick short-term memory, which covers quite a few, cognitive ability, attention, cognitive processes, visual memory, and age differences. So you can see that by doing so, I have kind of I can cut this down even further to look at something a bit more specific. I'm going to go ahead and click on age differences. And you can see that when I do that, I cut this down to about 242 different papers. Notice that some of these papers are helpful for me and some of them may not be. Maybe I'm not interested in isometric exercise helping working memory. Maybe I'm only interested in auditory memory and not visual. So this is a case where you can use some Boolean operators, words like or, not, and, etc., to help either broaden my search or constrict my search. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a Boolean memory or Boolean operator. I don't want any visual memory in here, and I want you to see what happens to my search. So in this case, I have not really constricted my search as much as I would have hoped. But if I pick age differences, as I did again, notice that I've kind of gotten rid of a lot of visual components of working memory in this case. So we can use a lot of different Boolean operators. If we go into advanced search, that might be able to help us out as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click on advanced search and see if I can use some of the operators to help me. So maybe part of the problem is that I didn't put my operators here. So I say not visual here. So I want a Boolean search mode. And I want you to kind of see what happens when I pick working memory, but I don't pick visual. You can see that it's still a pretty big, field here. So maybe we look at children. So we want working memory only for children. So these two qualifiers, working memory and children, have to be met, but we don't want to focus on visual working memory. So let's see what happens to my search. Notice I've just cut way down on my search, and I've thus restricted the type of studies that can be done. So notice, for example, phonological working memory in children with and without ADHD. Notice here that we're not really focused on visual working memory as much, specifically because I said I wanted only articles that mention working memory and children, but I don't want them talking about visual working memory. So you can use all of this information to help you. Now, another thing that you can do that can help you find other articles that I think can be really useful. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my search, and I'm going to look for any articles that contain me here in Psych Articles. So I'm going to go ahead and put my name and see what I find. And I have a publication from 2021 that I did with some associates. But what I want to show you are a couple of things when you click on this article. So notice here that we have all of the different affiliations. Notice that we have our source. So this was published in Developmental Psychology. This is volume number 57, January 2021, and page numbers. Here we have information about the publisher, the language, some keywords to help us out, and then an abstract, which kind of gives you a heads up as to what we were looking at in this study and what we found. We have different age groups, different tests and measures. These were grant funded, so the grant information is here as well, including the publication history with revisions and things like that. And as you can see, this is full text, so we can actually look at the article below. And if we wish, we can actually listen to it on the basis of accessibility. But there are a couple of really interesting tools that you can look at in this article. First of all, what you can see here is that we have references. So these are other articles that you can take a look at that we cite in this paper if you want to learn more. Now, another really cool thing about databases, though, you can also look at who has cited this. Who has cited this. So you can click on this section called Time Cited in this database, and it will tell you who looked at this. And so now we have other articles that we can look at to help us. Now, one of the major downsides, as you can kind of see with Psych Articles, is that while it has a lot of full articles for you to look at, it's not going to have everything. So if I go back through the articles that are included for me here in this database, I only have 2. I can tell you that I have published more than 2 articles. I haven't published that much more, but I have published more, and that's because only journals that are affiliated with APA publishers are going to be here. So both of these, Developmental Psychology and the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Learning, Memory, and Cognition, those are APA journals. Anything that's not an APA journal will not be included in this database. So there are things that we are missing here. Notice that when I tried to do a search for part set queuing or part list queuing, I only found 1 article from 2012. And I know that there are more out there. So we have a couple of other options to help us out with this, and one of those is Google Scholar. And I actually like Google Scholar a lot. So let's say, so it's scholar.google.com. And when you publish articles, you may also have a profile on there. I do. But let's say that I wanted to look at part set queuing. And notice here that all of a sudden I've got more mentions of part set queuing than I have previously. So I can look at information. So for example, part set queuing facilitation for spatial information, retrieval inhibition from part set queuing. There is our Nickerson 1984 article. But notice here that there are instances where I can obtain PDFs and information. I want to show you a couple of cool things about Google Scholar. So you can do searches with custom ranges and with relevant dates. You can pick a type of article. We're going to go ahead and say any type. You can also only pick review articles, in which case you might find something like Nickerson 1984, but I'm going to click on this. And part of the reason that I'm going to click on this article by Marsh, Dolan, Belota, and other colleagues is because it has a full PDF. But I want to go ahead and look at the entry first. So there's a couple of different interesting things you're going to see here in Google Scholar when you look at this entry. So notice that this is through APA PsycNet. For whatever reason, it is not on our list in Psych articles, but notice that we have a couple of different things here. So it's by Marsh, Dolan, Belota, and Roediger, Parts at Cueing Effects in Young and Older Adults. This is from 2004. It is in the journal Psychology and Aging. With a volume, an issue, so it's issue 19, volume 1, and page numbers, as well as a DOI. It has an abstract, but again, what I want to show you, it has who has cited it recently. So now we can find other articles to help us out. So here's a couple of different examples of how you can do this. You can also do this here in Google Scholar. So it says it's been cited by 69 people. If I go ahead and click that, here are all of the different articles. So this can help us out. Oh, hey, there's another article that we're probably going to be talking about because it involves parts at cueing. And I may have worked on it. But notice I have an easier time looking at articles on related topics when I see who has cited them. The other thing I like about Google Scholar is that we can get a PDF from this. So here we have the actual paper. We can also go through and look and see who they've cited to help us with these articles. So we have an article in full in PDF. One of the things that I will mention is that if Psych articles, if you're not able to find anything, Google Scholar is probably going to be a good opportunity for you. And that's largely because remember that if you are getting federal grant funding, it is a requirement to make your work available to the public. So if you can't find it on Psych articles, most likely it will be posted somewhere if it's been grant funded, and you'll have a really good chance of finding it on Google Scholar. So I would encourage you to check that out if you need to. So we've got about 15 minutes left, so let me know if you have any questions or if you need additional time on this assignment. But I do want to spend a little bit of time today talking about why research is the best source of information. We probably won't get very far in this, but I am going to pick up where we left off on Wednesday. So the objectives for this today are comparing research to our own personal experience. We'll talk a little bit about why it's so tempting to act like our experience is the only thing that matters, and we'll talk a little bit about why it's wrong. We'll talk about comparing research to our intuition, and again, why our intuition may mislead us. And then finally, we're going to finish by talking about finding research and actually reading research, which you're about to get your hands dirty with. So let's start by comparing research to personal experience and why research will often provide a better guide for us to learn about the world. So I won't deny that experiences are really powerful sources of information. So let's say that you read an article that says red meat and smoking are linked to cancer. I actually just read something a couple of days ago. Rates of colorectal cancer are increasing in people in their 40s and their 50s. And this is happening at an unprecedented rate. And one of the big takeaways that people have mentioned is highly processed meats. So this is a case where we're hearing about research, again, linking highly processed meat linked to cancer. Odds are pretty good you know somebody in your life, it might even be you, who does both of these things and doesn't have cancer. In fact, what you will find is that for a lot of people right now, there are more people who don't smoke getting lung cancer. And there's not necessarily a great explanation as to why. So, but I want to go back to this. You know somebody who eats a steak every day, they smoke like a chimney, they've never had cancer, they're completely healthy. does that actually mean that the research is wrong? One of the things that we have to talk about is that while we will occasionally find exceptions to the rule, research is often going to be about the generalized population. Does that mean that there will be exceptions? Yes. Does that mean that sometimes you might be the exception? Yeah. But most of the time, you're probably not the exception, and the research is not necessarily wrong. So I want to give you a couple of examples from your book. You've probably heard these kind of statements before. Somebody going, well, I've used tanning beds for 10 years. I've never had skin cancer. Somebody else saying, my knee doesn't give out as much as when I use kinesio tape or rock tape. And additionally, somebody will tell you that when you're mad, you'll feel a lot better when you vent your feelings online. You get that anger out, you take it out on somebody else, and then you feel great. So these are all examples of things that people say from their own experience that one might think ultimately contradicts research. An example of this that came up several years ago is the rise in things like rage rooms. So this was happening in Springfield back in 2018. I don't know if it's open. This is not the kind of place I would go. I would much rather go to an old school video arcade, but you can pay to break things. And I bet that some of you are hearing about this right now and going, oh my gosh, where do I sign up? Where do I sign up? I want to break some stuff. I'm really angry right now. And rage rooms are built on the whole premise that if you're angry about something, venting your anger will provide a very healthy cathartic release for you. So with this in mind, should you trust your experiences? Should you trust other people's experiences? Well, you can, but you shouldn't take them as a total means to truth. Your experiences are important. Your experiences shape your values, they shape your beliefs, and I'm not going to sit here and go that you are completely uninformed because you're just forming your values and your opinions based on your experience. Some of my most tightly held values and beliefs are because of things that I have experienced or because of people around me, things that they've experienced. I'm not going to argue out of your beliefs, particularly those based on your experience. However, experience, while true for you, may not be true for somebody else. And additionally, it's very different from research. So I want you, as you are thinking about your experiences and comparing them to research, to think about a couple of different things that we're going to talk about in greater detail. First of all, there's no comparison group. You can't compare. So for example, I grew up in a single parent household. People will often tell you that the research shows that growing up in a single parent household tends to not go very well for children. And while I had some very unpleasant experiences, I would like to say that I think I turned out pretty well despite all of the odds against me. Now, that doesn't mean that that research is invalidated. I have no comparison group. I can't compare my experience to what I would be like in a single parent household to myself if I had never been in a single parent household. So I have no possible comparison group. My experience is my experience. Additionally, there are going to be confounding variables. There are certain things that potentially can be confounded with our experience that might have led to the outcome that you and I can't remove. Now, when we do research, particularly experiments, we are going to have a comparison group. We are going to try to exercise as much control as possible to get rid of confounding variables. But we can't do that with our experiences. And I'm going to argue that research tends to work better for these purposes. And because it has probabilistic claims, we don't talk about everybody, we talk about most people or some people. Because it involves probabilistic claims, it does make room for those exceptions. Exceptions do not invalidate research. The fact that your grandma is 100 years old, eats a ribeye steak 3 times a day, and puffs on cigars like there's no tomorrow and has never gotten cancer doesn't invalidate the fact that those are clearly carcinogenic from the research. It makes room for exceptions by saying this accounts for most people, or some people, or people in general. So first of all, personal experience doesn't have a comparison group. So how many of you have had the experience where you're thinking of somebody and then they call? And you're like, oh my gosh, I was just thinking of you. I must be psychic. This must be cosmic. People get really excited about this. However, there are 3 other conditions that we need to consider. First of all, how many times have you thought of somebody and they didn't call you? That happens to me a lot. I think about my family. They don't always call exactly when I want them to. I think about my friends. They don't always call exactly when I want them to. You can think about examples where you didn't think of somebody and they didn't call you. I don't always think about my family often, but they'll call me. My sister will call me when I'm in the middle of teaching class. I'm not thinking about her while I'm teaching class, and I'm definitely not picking up the phone. And then finally, for our 4th comparison, how many times have you not thought of somebody and they didn't call you? We have to consider those other 3 possibilities before we start thinking, oh my gosh, this was meant to be, this was fated. Comparison groups allow us to consider other possibilities. So, for example, if you really think that rock tape works or kinesio tape works, you need to see what happens to your knee when rock tape isn't used. And we shouldn't just be talking about you. We should probably be looking at some other people who aren't you and comparing those different groups. Now, let's talk about a historical example. We're going to talk a little bit about bloodletting. So in the 1600s and the 1700s, there were some really interesting ideas for how to treat different ailments and illnesses, and medicine was not quite where it is today. And so one of the ways that people would try to treat problems was by things like leeching. So I have an example from The Simpsons. This is Bart pretending to be Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He's not feeling very well. And basically, Dr. Nick, who's kind of a quack, the 1700s version of Dr. Nick, comes in and goes, "This little boy has too much blood," and sticks a leech on him. So the thing is, there are people who would say, well, I bloodlet with leeches, and then it worked because this patient didn't die. But we need to look at appropriate comparisons. So let's say, for example, we have data that look like this. So we have 2 different outcomes. They either lived or they died. We have 2 things that potentially happened to them. They either received leeches and were bled, or they weren't. And we might think, oh, well, 20 patients survived compared to people who were not bled. However, we need to consider the ratio of people who were bled and died. We also need to consider the people who were not bled and survived and the people who were not bled and ultimately died. And what we can kind of see here with this particular data, and this is not real data, it's just hypothetical outcomes, we need to consider that, yeah, 100 people were bled, but only 20 of them lived, and that's about equal to people who were not bled. So let's consider if the data looks like this, if we change these values. Let's say that we find that only one person who wasn't bled died. All of a sudden, it looks like bleeding's not very helpful. You get a 20% survival rate compared to a 10 out of 11, 91% survival rate. Or consider if I increase the value. Now, this is what it would have to look like for you to think that bleeding made a difference. We would need to see a lot of people who were not bled and died versus those who were not bled and lived. This would be a 20% comparison to a 2% comparison. So this is what we would need to see for us to believe that bloodletting actually worked. We need to look at our appropriate comparison groups. If we don't have that, we can't make a clear claim that our experience is the main truth. Bloodletting works. I have cosmic powers because I thought of my friend and then they called. So I'm going to finish on this slide. Your experience is not just due to one cause. Everything that happens to you is a combination of biological factors, psychological factors, and social factors from a psychological standpoint. So, for example, let's say that a newspaper reports that there's better cognitive function in older adults who exercise. Well, that sounds really great, right? And then you go to the study and you read in the news study in the paper that they only looked at older adults who were in a group exercise class. They didn't look at people who exercised alone. And I've been in this enough that I can automatically see a problem with that. A group exercise class. That means that not only are these older adults getting physical activity, it's a group exercise class. They are also getting social interaction with other people. Would we necessarily find something similar in people who do solitary physical activity? Things like strength training, things like running, or other things. So if I were wanting to look at this study, I would want to try to remove the confound of social interaction. So, and if I really wanted to take it a step further, I could look at people in a group exercise class. I could look at people who are only getting the exercise component. They're basically running and working out in a solitary fashion, so they're getting the exercise but not the group activity. I would look at a group of older adults who are getting social interaction. Maybe they're working together on puzzles, or maybe they're just having a group chat or something like that. And then finally, I have a group of older adults who are not getting social interaction and are not getting exercise. Those would be great comparison groups. Now, generally, we can only isolate one confound at a time. So if we're going to look at exercise, we want to make sure as much as possible that no other things are coming into play that would be a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. We'll talk some more about the problems with experience and why research is better on Wednesday. Stay safe and walk carefully.